Okay, picture this. You decide to drive clear across the country, right? Just to set up shop in a garage somewhere and start writing a business plan completely from scratch.
Yeah, I mean, that's literally how the Amazon story kicked off.
Yeah.
Jeff Bezos packing up, leaving New York for Seattle.
It's a pretty wild starting point, isn't it?
It really is. It speaks volumes about his conviction from the get-go. This wasn't just some casual idea he was playing with.
No, definitely a full-on commitment, huge personal change right from day one.
Exactly.
And, well, that drive, that's really just chapter one of what we're getting into today. We're exploring how Amazon actually began this company that's, let's face it, a massive part of our lives now.
Right.
Our main source for this is Brad Stone's book, The Everything Store, Jeff Bezos and the Age of Amazon. So think of this deep dive as your fast track to understanding how this whole thing blew up from a basic concept to a global giant.
Mm-hmm. Without you needing to wade through the entire book, yeah.
Exactly.
And our goal isn't just, to retell the story beat by beat. We really want to pull out the key strategy, those critical moments, and get a handle on the mindset driving it all Bezos himself.
We're digging into the DNA, basically, the foundations of how Amazon became Amazon.
Precisely. What made it tick from the start?
Okay, so let's rewind even before that Seattle drive. There were apparently little clues early on, right? Like Bezos as a kid rigging up some kind of alarm to keep his siblings out of his room.
Huh, yeah. That does hint at that inventive problem-solving streak, doesn't it?
It does.
And if you zoom out a bit, you see those early inclinations, then you add his, well, pretty rigorous training in electrical engineering and computer science at Princeton. That gave him a serious toolkit.
Okay.
Plus his time at D.E. Shaw, that finance firm. They were deep into quantitative finance using data, models, that sort of thing. So he saw firsthand the power of, analytical thinking in business.
Right, the numbers side. And then came 1994. He sees this report projecting massive internet growth, and that sparks this key moment.
Yeah, the famous regret minimization framework.
Ah, that thing. The idea that he'd regret not trying more than he'd regret failing if he did try sounds like a real insight into his appetite for risk.
Totally. It's kind of a lens for understanding a lot of his later big bets, and it led him straight to the idea of an online bookstore.
Seems obvious now, maybe?
Well, yeah, but back then, it solved a huge problem. Physical bookstores just didn't have the shelf space for everything. The selection was limited. An online store could offer, theoretically, millions of titles.
So, okay, the Seattle garage, the tiny team, classic startup story, almost cliche. But the ambition, even then, it wasn't just about books, was it? That felt more like step one.
Exactly. Books were the strategic entry point. They had ISBNs, those standard codes. They were pretty easy to ship, and, there was already this huge existing catalog of them.
Made sense.
But his vision, definitely bigger. He was already thinking everything store way back then, even if it wasn't called that yet.
And two big principles hammered home from the very beginning. Customer obsession, like really focusing intensely on the customer,
Uh-huh.
relentlessly, and this need to move fast and think big. We still hear those phrases tied to Amazon all the time.
They really became the company's, operating system, that intense, demanding work culture, the whole Amazonian thing, pushing limits, innovating constantly, even being super frugal. It all stemmed from those core ideas.
Wasn't always easy, I gather.
No, by all accounts, it was tough. But it undeniably fueled that incredibly fast growth.
And growth was the obsession, right? Plowing almost all the money back into expanding the business instead of chasing short-term profits.
Absolutely. That must have required, a real leap of faith from those early investors.
Yeah, getting them on board with that.
It definitely went against the grain of typical business thinking back then, which was all about showing profits quickly. But Bezos was playing the long game. He knew building the infrastructure, adding more categories, CDs, electronics, toys, you name it, to actually become an everything store, needed massive ongoing investment.
And it wasn't smooth sailing. There were big hurdles, logistics, nightmares, money worries, lots of people thinking the whole online thing wouldn't last.
Oh, for sure. The early days were messy,
Yeah.
huge operational challenges. But Bezos just had this unwavering belief, apparently, that if you nail the customer experience, success will follow eventually.
Customer first, profits later.
That was the mantra. He was convinced they were linked. Prioritize the customer, the money will come.
Then 1997, the ITO, that must have been huge, gave them the cash to really accelerate that expansion.
Yeah, the initial public offering was absolutely pivotal. It injected the fuel they needed for that rapid growth we talked about.
But it also meant way more scrutiny, right? Being a public company.
Definitely. put them right under the microscope,
Mm.
and, importantly, it really put established retailers on notice. They suddenly saw this online player as a serious threat.
So, to stay ahead, Bezos knew they needed defenses, what people call moats in business.
Right, sustainable advantages, which led them pretty early on to experiment with letting other people sell on their site.
Hmm.
Things like Amazon auctions and Z-shops.
Interesting. So not just selling their own stuff.
Exactly. And that was a key insight, realizing they didn't have to own all the inventory themselves. Opening the platform up meant they could offer way more stuff without taking on all the risk and cost. Strategically, that was massive.
Okay, fast forward a bit. Year 2000, the dot-com bubble bursts. Boom, lots of internet companies just vanished.
Yeah, bloodbath.
Amazon's stock tanked, they had layoffs, must have felt like the walls were closing in.
It was a make-or-break moment, no doubt. Lots of people were predicting Amazon would go under too.
So what saved them?
Well, according to Stone, it was Bezos sticking to that long-term view and, crucially, deciding to double down on fixing their operations, making their fulfillment centers, their whole logistics network, way more efficient.
Using the crisis to get leaner?
Pretty much. They became a much tighter ship during that downturn.
And that operational strength then set the stage for some really big moves later on, like Amazon Marketplace.
Yes.
Yeah.
Marketplace. That was huge. Apparently, there was some internal resistance at first. People worried about competing with their own sales.
I can imagine.
But it completely changed their business model. They went from just being a retailer to being a platform. The sheer explosion in selection for customers was undeniable.
Game changer.
Totally.
And then Prime. Wow. Free 2-day shipping for a flat fee. That sounds like an insane gamble financially, especially back then.
It did. It seemed like a potential money pit. But it turned out to be a stroke of genius for customer loyalty.
Yeah, it changed how people shopped, didn't it?
Fundamentally, it made Amazon the default for so many people.
Yeah.
It encouraged more frequent buying, locked customers into their ecosystem. Huge competitive advantage.
And all through this period of like hyper growth, Bezos's leadership style known for being pretty demanding, right?
Intense is the word often used. Incredibly high standards, always questioning things, laser focused on results.
Yeah, the book suggests it wasn't about being liked, it was about building something massive and lasting.
Exactly. Which then leads into another big shift. Moving into digital with the Kindle in 2007. That felt like a real pivot away from just physical stuff.
It really did.
The Kindle showed Amazon wasn't just a store anymore. They were a tech company, an innovator. It let them control the whole reading experience, the device, the content.
And really shake up the publishing industry.
Oh, yeah. Major disruption. Especially with Bezos' aggressive pricing on ebooks. He clearly wanted market share, even if it ruffled a lot of feathers with publishers.
It showed they were willing to disrupt even their own existing book business in a way.
Right. Cannibalize themselves if needed for the bigger, longer-term win.
Okay, and then almost quietly at first came AWS, Amazon Web Services, 2006. Started internal, now it's enormous.
It's kind of staggering, isn't it? AWS is a perfect example of that Bezos long-term thinking, seeing opportunities beyond just retail.
How did it even start?
They built this incredible computing infrastructure to handle their own massive scaling needs, and then they realized, hey, other businesses probably need this kind of computing power too. So they started renting it out.
Wow, building tools for themselves and then selling the tools.
Exactly. Born from an internal need, but it turned into this foundational piece of the internet and a massive profit center for Amazon.
But of course, with all this size and power comes the other side. Growing criticism, scrutiny.
Absolutely. You can't get that big without attracting attention, both good and bad. Concerns about warehouse worker conditions, how they deal with suppliers, accusations of being anti-competitive.
Yeah, those are serious issues that Stone's book touches on too, right? It doesn't shy away from the complexities.
No, it presents a picture that includes those criticisms.
Right.
The relentless efficiency drive and the intense work culture definitely have aspects that raise ethical questions for some people.
And the personal toll. Leading something like that must be immense. The book mentions his relationship with Mackenzie Scott, though their divorce happened after it was published.
Right, the book came out before the divorce, but it does give you glimpses of the kind of pressure involved in building and running a company on that scale. It hints at the sacrifices, the personal costs that can come with that level of ambition.
So when you step back and look at the Amazon story told in the Everything Store, what's the big picture? This company changed everything about shopping.
I think the core message is that these kinds of revolutionary companies don't just happen by accident or overnight. Stone really highlights the importance of having that clear, bold vision,
Oh,
that obsessive focus on the customer, being willing to experiment constantly to disrupt even yourself,
right.
and of course the sheer relentless drive of Bezos himself. He fundamentally changed what we, as consumers, expect.
Mhm.
Choice, speed, convenience. He reset the bar.
So for you, the listener, wanting that quick takeaway on Amazon's origins, what should really stick?
It's that potent mix, isn't it? Thinking super long-term, being almost fanatically customer-focused, and just constantly pushing, innovating, expanding, even when it seems risky or weird.
Yeah, that combination seems cute.
And remembering, it wasn't a straight lineup. It involved huge risks, intense pressure, and, as we've said, it raised some really important questions along the way, too.
Understanding those roots gives you real insight into, well, modern business and innovation, the good and the challenging.
Definitely, both the potential and the pitfalls.
Okay, so here's something to maybe chew on after this. As Amazon keeps growing and changing, affecting our lives in even more ways, what parts of that original philosophy, that Bezos leadership style, do you think will last?
Interesting question.
And what parts might actually need to change or adapt for whatever comes next? We're thinking about that balance between, relentless ambition and its wider impact on the world.